Professor Derek Attridge, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us today, and welcome to Alliance University, and in particular the inaugural year of the School of Liberal Arts, where you have come to visit the campus, the beautiful campus, but also to teach on the Global Leaders Alliance Fellowship postgraduate diploma. So I wanted to ask you some questions about the liberal arts in general, and also about your specialist area of literature. And so start off with a big question. Now, you've been a visiting professor at many different universities in the UK and the USA. So you have a lot of experience of liberal arts across globally. It's perhaps not so well known the value of the liberal arts in higher education in India. So what would you say to someone who said, well, what's the point of studying liberal arts? That's not going to take you towards an obvious job choice. It's not going to help your employability. What would you say about, to young people, and perhaps to the parents of young people who wanted to know what's in it for young people in terms of employment, preparation for employment, but also perhaps preparation for life in general? It's a big question, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It's a great pleasure to be here to experience the pleasures of the Alliance University campus for the first time, and I'm looking forward to teaching on the Global Leaders Alliance program next week. Yes, that is a very big question, but I'm sure it's one that many prospective students and parents find themselves asking. There are clearly degrees which are very practical in the sense that they lead straight into a particular profession, a particular job, and people might well ask whether a liberal arts degree is suited to the kind of competitive world that we live in today. And my answer is a resounding yes. It is extremely well suited to the kind of world we live in, that precisely because it doesn't narrow down the options for a student. On the contrary, it opens up a whole field of possibility. The study of the history of the nation and of the world, the study of the literary and artistic achievements of the cultures, again of the nation, but also of the globe, the growing expertise in handling of language or the visual arts or of music, all these things contribute to a broadening of perspectives that is something that employers in a whole range of fields really want. It's been shown time and again that students with degrees in the liberal arts, in the humanities, have the skills, have the approach, have the openness to experience, have the willingness to try out new things that employers want. And many employers don't want students who have one-track mind, who've been focused on just one way of being in the world, one way of approaching problems, but who are ready to rise to challenge. And we don't know what the new challenges will be. It's all very well being trained in the practical or the scientific or the mechanical skills of today, but what really we need is people who have been trained to respond creatively to new challenges, to the challenges that are around the corner that none of us can see coming. So yes, I would say, to answer the first part of your question, that's to say, in terms of actual employment, a liberal arts degree is immensely valuable. You also said, what about a preparation for life? And I think there can be no doubt that what students in the liberal arts learn is not just a series of facts, but a way of being, a way of living, a way of questioning, a way of valuing a whole range of activities, of people, of cultures in the world today. We live in such a globalized world that any program that enables a student to understand, appreciate, find value in the cultures of other peoples, other nations, other parts of the world is going to be, I think, crucially important in existing in as fruitful a way in the world that we are now in.
Yeah, and you talked about that need to not be narrow in your focus. The Global Leaders Alliance course program that we have here is interdisciplinary, and even the course that we are co-teaching together is across different disciplines within the arts. That's not an easy sell either, interdisciplinarity, but it is, I think, in sympathy with the Indian government's new education policy. So what do you think about this interdisciplinary approach to the postgraduate diploma that we have going here?
I think it's immensely valuable to study a single art form or to work in a single academic genre like history is to actually not study that particular art form or that particular genre properly, because in order to understand literature you need to know something about history, you need to know something about the other art forms that accompany the literary work that you are studying, and in order to study a historical period you need to know about the culture of that period. To study cultures in other countries you need to have a wide range of approaches, not just factual but also in terms of the value, the ethical underpinnings of various ways of living, various ways of making art. In all these ways I think interdisciplinarity is crucial. If by interdisciplinarity we mean looking from one art form and from one academic genre across to others and seeing how they enrich one another, how they rely on one another in order to be what they are. So I would say interdisciplinarity is not something that we impose on the world of culture. Rather, it's something that the world of culture already exists in and needs and depends on, and that in approaching it, that world of culture in an interdisciplinary way, what you're doing is approaching it in the way that it really demands.
Yes, but the institutions often militate against that by their rigid sort of disciplinary boundaries. That's well, okay, if I can narrow us down and get to my favourite subject, which is English literature. This has been your passion for many decades, if you don't mind me saying, and you've written many books on poetry, on literary theory, on James Joyce. I could go on. Most recently, a wonderful historical sweep from classical literature through to my own period of the early modern period of Shakespeare, talking about the experience of poetry. And you don't need to convince me of the value of studying literature, but again, it's perhaps even amongst the liberal arts, not the area that's most thought of as being practical and useful. So if I could ask you the same sort of question really about why study literature, are there special reasons why literature is perhaps one of the most important, if not the most important, discipline within the liberal arts.
Right. Well, since you and I are both literary specialists, we're bound to say it's one of the most important, if not the most important. But I think there are good reasons for valuing literature and for encouraging students, in fact, encouraging students following any program in any discipline, in the sciences, in engineering, in medicine, to study literary works for a number of reasons. One is simply that communication is essential to whatever field you're working in, whatever employment you undertake. The use of language in a way that is precise, that gets across your meaning, the ability to understand the subtleties, the nuances of spoken and written language, all these are clearly crucial. And so the practical skills that we teach in literary courses, the reading and analysing of literary texts, where language is being used in its most subtle, complex, powerful, emotionally affecting way, is going to be of immense value to students. So that's one aspect, the skill that you learn in language. But of course, literature goes way beyond simply the skillful use of language. Literature involves the imaginative engagement with a whole range of other ways of seeing the world, be they historical or culturally different, or belonging to different classes within a particular culture. Literature opens a window to other ways of being, other understandings of the world, other approaches to the very things that the particular individual values most highly. So literature, to read a work of literature with real understanding and to enjoy it, because literature after all is there to give pleasure, is to enter a world that is not one's own world. It's to enter another world and to be involved in that world and to find in many ways one's own world being questioned, or at least being given some perspective, so an ability to see your own way of life as if from the outside, because you're being taken through literary works into these other worlds. Now you could say that painting does that too. Certainly music, which involves verbal settings, it does that to some extent. But I think nothing quite as much as a powerful novel or play, poem, for giving you the insight into other ways of being that is so crucial. So I'd say there's at least two of the ways in which I think literature plays a crucial role in any education.
Can I push you on just one of those? You mentioned poetry, because I know that's a particular love of yours. And maybe this is our last question. I don't want to keep you, but you've written numerous books about poetry, and especially about rhythm and about the pleasure of poetry. Not just the technical aspects, which you write a great deal about, but what is special about poetry? Why is it still so popular today? Why are students that I know here at Alliance University into poetry still? It's a sort of quite. It's not just an academic discipline. What do you think is the answer to that? The lasting appeal of poetry since, as your book discussed, since the ancient Greeks.
A critic once said that poetry is language at full stretch. It's language doing what it can do to the utmost degree. It's language at its most powerful, its most moving, its most engaging, it's most involving, and I think I'm very glad to hear that in India poetry is still very much alive and kicking. In Britain and in the USA, I find students are often a bit afraid of poetry. It's odd because they write poetry and read poetry in their schools, but there's something about the analysis of poetry that sometimes can be a bit forbidding. I try and encourage students not to think about what they ought to say about a poem, but just to live with it, to let it speak. And then I think poetry, because skilled poets are doing things with language that the richest novel can't do. It's not drawing, prose doesn't draw on every aspect of language in the way that poetry does. Poetry draws not just on representation, on the way words can tell you about the world and about people and ideas and emotions. Poetry enacts those feelings and those understandings through the very sounds and rhythms of the language. I'm sure you would agree with that, Anthony. So it's not surprising to me that people who get it, people who understand what poetry can give them, rate it so highly. It's the queen of literary arts, if you like.
Thank you very much, Professor Derek Attridge, for sharing your thoughts and experience and wisdom with us.